Sometimes when you're playing the long game, you have to make small moves in order to set up big moves. Well, when it comes to Brad Holmes, he hasn't made a whole lot of big moves yet, but could that be him setting up for a grand finale? We're going to talk about it, so stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So, folks, here's the thing. I know because of how active I am with making videos, how active I am on social media, there are a lot of Lions fans that are just, scratching their heads. They're just losing their mind because of the fact that Brad Holmes has not really made a big-time move when it comes to the edge rushing, department. The only move that he's made that has been of any sort of noteworthiness is when we released edge rusher Zadarius Smith. And ever since that move, Lions fans, a lot of them have just been like, okay, what is Brad Holmes going to do? What is he going to do to help, bring in somebody else to be a bookend opposite of Hutchinson? And to be honest, Brad Holmes has not done a whole lot in that regard. And I know it's frustrating for some Lions fans. But if you read the tea leaves, if you look at the trees through the forest, what Brad Holmes is doing is very much akin to kind of like a master chess strategist. Brad Holmes so far has made a lot of re-signings for players that were here last year. In fact, he's already made a couple of guys that we had last year come back, such as Pat O'Connor. We also got Al-Quadin Muhammad. He's come back. Other guys like Tim Patrick have come back. I mean, Brad Holmes is bringing back a lot of guys that were here last year. And you know what? I know for some people, they're like, okay, that's great, grand, fine, and glorious and all, but that's not what we're looking for. And I understand that that is a bit of a frustrating aspect. But you have to understand what Brad Holmes is doing. First and foremost here, I know Muhammad is not a name that a lot of people are all that, hyped up on. But if you actually take a look at what Muhammad did last year, he was actually a pretty good rotational piece for us. He had 3 sacks last year in 9 games. He had a near 14% pass rush win rate as an edge rusher. So even though some may not see him as a starting level talent, you got to think about it. For 9 games last year, he did actually pretty well for us as far as a rotational starting piece. Like, hey, you know what? We need you to go in. We need you to play a couple of downs. We need you to do this, that, or the other thing. He actually did pretty good for us. Now, like I said, Muhammad, Lopez, O'Connor, these are guys that are not big-time sexy moves. They're just not. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It'd be like trying to sugarcoat a turd and trying to say it's ice cream. Everybody knows that's not the case. But even though these aren't big-time moves, they still serve an important purpose. Like I said, Brad Holmes is a chess master. This guy knows what he's doing. Now, I'm not saying that, you don't have the right to question him. You certainly do. I've questioned him myself before. But there's a fine line between questioning and criticizing. When I take a look at what Brad Holmes has been doing this offseason, he is being very much like a chess master, and what he's doing is he is setting up his finishing move by making all of the preparatory moves. Now, some people might understand exactly what I'm saying here, some might not. But what I'm trying to say here is this. By Brad Holmes making all of these smaller moves, he's getting ready to set up something big. He's getting ready to reveal his masterpiece for this year. And I'm confident that Brad Holmes and the Lions knew that almost from the beginning, and they are doing the exact same thing that I'm talking about here with these moves that I just talked about. All of these small moves, these one-year deals that aren't for a whole lot of money, they're not going to grab a whole lot of people's attention as being like, ooh, wow, this is a great move. That's what these moves are doing. They're setting up for something else. Now, again, I know that that's not at all what Lions fans, especially the ones that are like waiting earnestly for something to happen, want to hear. They want to hear about a big move. They want to hear about an exciting move. They want to hear about a move that is going to energize the fan base. And I understand that that is all that you guys want to hear for the most part. And you know what? I can tell you this right now. Brad Holmes also knows that. But Brad Holmes also recognizes the fundamental importance that these small moves, play. They allow you to set up for that grand finale to ensure that your roster is 100% ready to rock and roll. Because let's think about it here. These moves that Brad Holmes is making, you want to know what they tell me? It tells me that Brad Holmes took notes and learned something from last year. He learned two things last year that he's trying to, fix. He's trying to address. One, they do need another reliable, competent edge opposite of Hutch. The reason I know that is because when they went to the freaking, combine, they had 7 meetings with different edge rushers. That right there tells me Brad Holmes is like, okay, I know I need to get somebody opposite of Hutch on the edge, so that way we can have 2 competent edge rushers applying pressure. So that is one thing I already know that Brad Holmes has recognized and he is trying to fix. But the second thing he's trying to address is the depth and rotation. And the reason I know this is because it's like, okay, Brad Holmes watched the football games just like we did last year. And he knows that the Lions defense had an absolutely bizarre season in the fact that we had all of these different injuries, many of which were like these really just freak accidents, and you have to prepare for that. The Lions were not very prepared for it last year because, one, they lost a lot of starting pieces, and even after they went through some of their reserves, they lost more. And again, I understand. Holmes also understands that fans would love to get their hands on a top edge rusher, a blue chip guy like a Trey Hendrickson, because that's the name of, what everybody's going with. That's the flavor of the month. And don't get me wrong, I would love it if we could get Trey Hendrickson. But that was only when it was like a 2 or a 3 round pick that what the Bengals were asking. Now they're asking for a first round pick on top of Trey Hendrickson getting a new deal. And it's like, listen, while a move like that would be exciting, and it definitely would energize the fan base, it's also going to sacrifice Holmes' ability to ensure that the team has a good stock of depth and rotation players to ensure that, hey, if by some freak accident again, the Lions should have another slew of injuries. Again, knock on wood. But you want to make sure that you not only have good starting level players, but in case somebody goes down with injury, you have somebody who can come in and help fill that void. Well, you can't do that very well if you're out there spending $30, $35+ million on one player or on a handful of players. Plus, on top of that, the Lions also are trying to find rotational starters or rotational pieces that say, hey, you know what? To also help minimize injuries, to minimize the likelihood of them, we will make sure that we've got guys that maybe they're not full-time starting level, but hey, we bring them in for a drive or two, allow our full-time starters to get a breather. That will also lessen the likelihood of them getting injured in the first place. What Holmes is trying to do is he's trying to address both sides of the spectrum. He wants to make sure that, okay, I have a guy that I can put opposite of Hutch that is a reliable, competent, and also consistent edge rusher. But at the same time, I also want to make sure I have depth in case, again, something should happen like what happened last year. Now, I know that for Lions fans, that's not necessarily something they want to hear. Because what does it mean, most likely, or probably? It means that you're most likely going to have to sacrifice getting that really shiny, really cool, really nice new player that fans would go absolutely goo-goo gaga over. They go wild nuts over it. But let me put it to you this way, folks. You can still get quality good players, maybe not a blue chip player like a Trey Hendrickson, but you can still get quality good players while at the same time maintaining and ensuring that your depth and rotational pieces are also in place. Because let me put it to you this way. What makes better sense? You invest all this money into this one great player, and then all of a sudden, boom. For whatever reason, they go down with injury, and now you have got nobody behind them. You don't even have an idea of who you have behind them because you were more focused on getting that top-end player that you didn't really have enough money to go out and make sure there was a quality backup there. That is what Brad Holmes is trying to do. He's trying to find somebody that's probably a high C to a low to mid B kind of edge rusher for right now. And then he wants to make sure he's got enough quality depth and rotation behind that without having to worry about jeopardizing the financial situation that we're in. Which I know some people are like, David, what are you talking about? We've got $50 million in cap space. Right. We have that right now. But again, we still have to spend 10 to 12 million of that on our incoming draft class. We still have to re-sign Kirby Joseph and also Aiden Hutchinson. So it's like, listen, you can kiss a lot of that money goodbye because it's already been spent without it actually being, put ink to contract. So what Brad Holmes is trying to do now that he's, signed these depth pieces, at least some of them, some of these rotational pieces, is that now it's like, okay, I've got something to work with on the back burner. I have depth. I have rotation to work with. Now I can really start focusing on getting starting level quality players on the defense without risking draining the coffers or losing out on getting those good quality depth and rotational players. This is why I believe 100% firmly that what Brad Holmes is going to do for the rest of this offseason is he's going to draft a top-end edge rusher. He might trade up. I don't know, but I wouldn't be against the idea of doing it. And he's probably also still going to get some good pieces to further supplement the team in other areas. Add more depth, add more rotation. And who knows, maybe he might find another diamond in the rough, like a Kirby Joseph, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, like a Derek Barnes, like a Rodrigo. Notice how many of those names I freaking rattled off there. That ought to tell you something. The point is, though, is that Brad Holmes is on top of things. I'm not saying he's perfect, because he's not. Brad Holmes has made his fair share of mistakes. But to say that Brad Holmes doesn't know what the hell he's doing is just ludicrous. He knows what he's doing. He's trying his damn level best to make sure it's like, okay, I maintain the future element of the team while also addressing the here and now elements. That's why I believe he's going to take the draft and make sure he gets that top edge rusher and, add other pieces. And then probably once the draft is done, he's probably going to go into the second round of free agency or the second wave of free agency frenzy that typically happens after the draft and get other pieces. That's why I think this plan makes sense. And it shows that Brad Holmes is playing chess a lot when other people are just thinking in terms of checkers. Now, I'm not saying that to, insult anybody's intelligence, but it's like, listen, Brad Holmes knows a lot of stuff that's going on right now, and he has to manage and he has to understand and plan for all of these different moves that are happening. Well, what that allows him to do by being that way, it allows him to plan to make his moves carefully and ensure he covers all of his bases. And not only filling the roster through the draft and free agency, but also making sure he can extend those deserving players like Hutch, like Kirby, and then all those other guys that are coming up in 2025. That's why this is such a very tricky balancing act. And it's not something that you should just jump headfirst into and be like, oh, well, we just need to throw all of our money at this. It's like, no, you have to slow down. again, read the tea leaves, look at the tree through the forest, and figure out, okay, what's the best move possible? Again, there's a perfect line from the movie Lincoln. I don't know if anybody's watched that movie, but I know I sure have. When freaking President Lincoln was talking with the guy from the House of Representatives, he's like, oh yeah, he's like, a compass, it'll tell you true north, and it'll tell you how to get there. But it doesn't account for all the freaking swamps and dips and all these crevices that are in the way. You have to be able to manage, and you have to be able to understand that, hey, even though you're trying to go true north, you're probably going to have to move out of your way a couple of spots because there are going to be dangers that you're not going to be able to prepare for until you get there. That's what I think Brad Holmes is doing. He realizes, hey, I got to go in this direction, but I also have to manage myself and manage the team to make sure I don't put us in a jeopardizing situation. Whereas a lot of Lions fans are just like, hey, you know what? Damn the torpedoes and full steam ahead. It's like, slow your roll a little bit. Trust the man that got us here because, hey, I'm just going to put this out there. Name me one other Lions GM that has done what Brad Holmes has done, and then ask yourself if you would prefer to have one of them versus Brad Holmes. And I guarantee you this, ain't nobody going to say that. And if you did, I'd probably call you a liar. But anyway, I'm going to end this episode. I think I've made the point. So I'm going to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also encourage y'all to share the content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share anywhere and everywhere you possibly can. The more we can do that, the greater the channel can grow and spread. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the content. I hope I was able to give you all a new perspective, something to think and mull over. Whether this is the first time you're watching me, you guys have been watching me forever and a day. I also hope that everyone has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.